everyone. It's Heather Clancy here with the latest episode of Climate Pioneers. I'm really happy that you've joined us live today, or if you're not live, that you're watching this recorded video later. Today, I am really honored to have the sustainability chief at Volvo Group with me. Volvo Group, for those of you who are just tuning in, is the leader in long-haul electric trucks and lots of other things. And I'm really thrilled to be speaking with Karin Svensson, the CSO of Volvo Group. Karin, hello. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's my privilege. Thank you very much. And I love your background. So I call this portion of the interview the getting to know you section. And I wanted to just call out something from your bio that I found very intriguing because there's there's sort of a history of women not being so involved in the transportation industries, but you've been at Volvo a very long time. You have a very long history in transport, in automotive issues. And I'm curious how that sort of led you to where you are now. Like you went this path of not being in sustainability, but now very much so. How does that path affect how you think as a sustainability officer?
I think you can have different ways into my type of role, and I've been with the company more than 25 years. I started in R&D, so I've seen many of the things that is now becoming a reality, like electric vehicles. I saw when they were just in the research phase. So I have a lot of that background with me. I've also spent some years in corporate or group strategy, understanding a little bit about the business, what is required for us to be successful from a business perspective. And then I spent 5 years in public affairs, so dealing with policymakers. And I think all of these experiences have actually been a very, very good background for me to come into this position. And then, of course, I have a team of sustainability experts that can help me on any type of question.
Yeah. So could you give me a little bit more color on that? So when you say that it helps, in what way does it help? Is it because you know who to go to? Is it because you know how to talk to them? How does it help you?
From an internal perspective, it really helps to have a big network of people. Having worked 28 years, I know not all of the 100,000 employees, of course, but I know a lot of people in the group, and that's very good. Sustainability is to be integrated in every part of the business, and then you need to know different people. But I think also from understanding how we do business, what is of interest and value for our customers is really, really important in my role.
And who do you report to?
I report to the executive board of the Volvo Group.
The board. Okay, so interesting.
No,
So
to the management, the top management team, I should say.
Got it.
Yeah.
Perfect. How does that help in your position?
That helps in that way that it has to be very closely integrated to the business strategy of the company. So this is not a job I can do myself, of course. I'm really, really relying on all the different functions, anything from R&D to operations to purchasing, to fulfill the sustainability ambitions that we have set for ourselves. So it's really important.
Yeah, we're going to definitely get more into that strategy in a moment. But I want to ask a couple more questions about your team. So what do you ask every job candidate as you're building out your team?
Why this job? And I think that's a question I would have asked in any type of position, but I think motivation for the job is really, really crucial. I always say that it's just as important that the candidates want the job as that I want this specific person. So I think that's important. A couple of other things specific maybe to this position is, of course, the ability to lead not only your own people, but to lead cross-functionally. It's really, really important, and an understanding of the business. Ability to inspire, I think, is important. But not the least, you need to have patience and quite a lot of persistence to be successful in a role in my team.
And how do you motivate your team? What do you feel are successful strategies in doing that?
I think there are two very, very important things when working with a very competent and driven team like my team, and that is to give them trust, that I trust that they can do things and that I listen a lot to them. And as I come from a very diverse background myself, but not specifically from sustainability, I have to listen carefully to what they say. So I think that's important. Other things that also is important for me to motivate me is, of course, to talk a lot about the why. Why do we do the things we do? How is it connected to the journey and the transition of the Volvo Group? I think another thing is to be transparent about our plans and the progress that we are doing every day. That's also a very important way to motivate. And not the least then to show how we are integrating sustainability into the business. I think a good way of demotivating your team is to see sustainability as something that you put on top of the business. We really want to make sure that it's integrated into every part of the business.
So it does sound like you get a little of this from your team, but I'm curious who you count on for a reality check. So, like, what do I really think about this? Like, who can you go to that will say, no, that doesn't work, or yeah, that's great?
I have quite an extensive external network of sustainability peers, people having a similar position to myself, but in other companies, in other businesses. I think that's people I go to sometimes when I have difficulties, because challenges often are similar between companies. It's maybe not technology challenges per se, but how to get things done. And then I really rely on my external network. But once again, I would say that if I want to bounce off some ideas, my team is also good, because they will tell me if I'm completely off in certain things. So that's, I think, important. Another thing is to rely on data also in my area. I think looking at the data to follow up on our performance, so to see that we are tracking in the right way, is also important for me.
Okay, so let's dig into a little bit more about what you're doing. So I
Yeah.
mentioned at the top of the interview that Volvo has, as of June, I'm sure this number is different now, you had sold more than 3,500 electric trucks in the past 5 years. That's pretty amazing. That's a pretty great, it's a small number, but it's a big number for this sector. What do the early adopters share in common? So the people that are buying those trucks, what do they share in common?
I think, first of all, they share a vision and ambition to become more sustainable in their business. If I take our customers, for example, many of our customers have also signed up for the science-based targets. So they have a ambition and a target and a roadmap to decarbonize. Also, we see that our customer have this ambition. So I think that is necessary to be an early adopter. And the other thing is that they have a willingness to take risk, but also a trust in the fact that we need to become much more sustainable, and that they will trust the fact that we might not have all the answers today, but we will have them as we move forward, and that we are willing to work together and collaborate. That's some of the things that I've seen.
So when you're engaging with these, actually, when you're engaging with a prospective customer, what are the things that help seal a deal, and how long does this take? And when I ask how long a deployment takes, I guess I mean from negotiation through getting the thing into the field. So tell us a little bit about the dynamics of convincing, of getting that deal done and getting it out, getting those trucks on the road.
I think, first of all, it's important to understand that this differs very much among different types of customers and what kind of segment we're in. So is this distribution? Is this long haul? What kind of segment are we in? And it differs a lot between the regions and the markets. Because there are a number of prerequisites that needs to be in place in order actually to, for example, buy an electric truck. But having said that, I think what is important is that we work very close with our customers. And luckily in our business, that's something that has been important long since before we started to talk about electric trucks, to be close to your customer. But in this case, you need to be even closer. You need to understand the way they operate, because we can't only sell a truck. We need to sell the whole package. So that we need to help them with route planning. We need to help them with charging. We need to help them with, there could be other types of permits, etc. So there are a whole set of things, because this is in most cases, this will be a completely new way for them to operate their fleet. So we need to work, and so the process takes definitely longer than selling one of the regular truck, if I can call them like that. And we will, in most cases, have to share more of the data. We have to take more time to get to know each other. We might have to use to show cases from other customers how this have worked. But in the end, we often see that when they have done this change, they are happy because they see not only the benefits from an emission perspective, but they will also get a vehicle which is, it's not as much noise, it's less vibration, it's better for the driver, etc. So there are many benefits to this.
Yeah. So when you talk about data, what do you mean by that? They need to give you more information about how they drive, or just so you can determine what?
Yeah. So we can determine, for example, size of batteries, how you could optimize. Can you charge only during night? Do you have to charge during the day? So these types of things. So route planning, for example, is something we can support with.
And when we say they take longer, the deployments take longer, what does that mean? What does that look like? Is there a typical number, or?
I think that depends very much upon the customer and the maturity, but definitely we spend more time selling the electric trucks than we do selling I wouldn't like to call them regular trucks, but I don't find a better word right now.
Current trucks, legacy trucks.
Maybe.
Yeah. And you do have a lot of high profile customers. I want to key in on a one in particular, Amazon. You are at the center of this 50 vehicle fleet deployment they have in Southern California. How did you, let's poke in a little bit more, how did you partner with them to figure out what models, because you have several different models, and what the order in which you were going to deploy, I suppose? How did you work with them?
Yeah, I think we see that partnership is very, very important way forward when it comes to the moving from the current platform to more of a green platform. So we are always looking for both customers, but also other types of partnerships to make sure that we progress. And with Amazon, we had a good fit. We have the same starting point in the sense that we are sharing the same type of sustainability ambitions, becoming net zero, but also very similar ambitions when it comes to safety. So in 2022, they ordered 29 electric trucks in Europe to electrify parts of their fleet. And they were actually among the first customers we had in Europe with electric trucks. In US, they are using our trucks for so-called first mile operations. So that is moving goods from container ships to ports and distribution centers. That's a typical route, which is a little bit easier, if I can say that, to electrify, because you know more the route and then you can plan for charging, etc. But we are also moving in also to other types of logistics together with Amazon. And I think that all in all, it goes for all of these partnerships that you need to build that trust and you need to be willing to share some of the risks. So that's sort of some very important basics for this type of relationship. And then, of course, it helped that they were operating also in parts like in California, where we see very strict and at the same time quite progressive regulation coming in place. So we are helped both by the ambition of the both two companies, but also by policy makings putting in place good prerequisites for us to operate there.
Mm-hmm. What were the obstacles you faced in that particular deployment?
I think the obstacles are very much the same we see in many of these partnerships and with many of our customers, and that is that we need to have an ecosystem around that moves in sync with us and the customer. So it's things like we have talked about, like charging infrastructure. It's things like not having enough access to renewable or fossil-free energy, that the grid might not have the right capacity to do charging in certain place, but also, of course, then policy measures of different kinds to make sure that it actually is feasible for our customers to make the shift.
I see that the audience has some questions coming in. I want to thank you for that, and I'm going to come to those in a moment. But keep them coming. I really appreciate your engagement. So we'll come to you in a minute. I want to keep poking into this particular electric truck conversation. You have a truck you've just introduced, a range of 373 miles. 2025, I believe, is the delivery time frame. Why is this notable? Why is this so important?
Yeah, because that will make it possible for our customers to charge during night. Then it's fully charged, and then it can be operating for many customers during the full day. So it won't interact in that way with their operations. And that is, of course, what we have today in the current trucks. So it will make it much easier for our customers. So therefore, it's important, and it will add new types of customers and segments to our existing offering on the electric side. So it's really a milestone for us.
What other milestones are on the horizon?
We have what we call a three-pronged approach when it comes to decarbonizing our products in use. So battery electric is one, and then we're adding, like this year, we have added 2 new fully electric models. So now we have I think we have 8 different models of electric trucks. So that's, of course, a big milestone also for us. But we also are looking into fuel cell electric vehicles, and we are continuing the development of the internal combustion engine, but then being filled with something else than diesel, for example, hydrogen. And we are making a test with customers in a couple of years. And we foresee that we will have a hydrogen, a fuel cell electric truck as an offer to our customers later this decade. So those are other things that we are looking forward to, because we think that as this electrification or as this transition will have to happen segment by segment and region by region, we need to have different options for different types of customers. So there will not be one size fits all.
So I want to mention a couple of stats here. Last year, your company represented 44% of all electric trucks sold in the US. How are we tracking this year?
I actually don't know that number exactly how we track in US, but I know that in Europe we have a market share of almost 70%.
Okay.
So we are on good levels. However, we are still selling quite low numbers if you compare to selling other types of trucks. Yeah. So we are hoping, of course, that the electrification will take off, not only for us, but for the world. We want to see more of electrification out on the road, but there are still some obstacles. So we are really, really happy to be a market leader and to get these trucks out, but we need more of them.
So the company's goal is to deliver 100% fossil fuels free vehicles by 2040. And that includes some of the other technologies you mentioned. It's not just trucks, right? So tell us a little bit more about some of these other heavy duty vehicles you've got on the road. The excavators aren't necessarily on the road, but buses sure are. Yeah. What's the outlook for some of those other types of vehicles?
If we start with buses, then that really shows that electrification is not something new for us. We've been delivering and selling electric buses for more than 10 years. And of course, that's a crucial component to decarbonize, especially in the cities. And through public procurement and other types of measures, the fleets of electric trucks have really, really grown. So that's something that we are looking forward to continuing to progress. But also when it comes to construction equipment, we see a pickup. We have many more models now being electrified, which gives good benefits, especially when they are being used in cities, because they are in the same way as a truck. It's less noise, less vibration. So it's just better for the people operating, but also the people in the environment around. So we Yeah, we are progressing also there.
Excellent. There's a really good audience question that will kind of bring us into the next area of questioning I had as it is. So we talk about electric, right? We assume these are more sustainable than other formats of vehicles. But there's other, it's not just the engine, right? There's other components of a vehicle. So the question has to do with, can you describe how sustainability related requirements are defined and formalized for new products? So I guess that would also pertain to steel or the tires or the leather on the seats, or not leather, but the whatever the fabric is on the seats.
Yeah.
How do you work on that portion of it? Where does your team play a role in that?
I think first of all, if we talk about it from a greenhouse gas emission perspective, if we look upon all of our emissions, more than 95% comes from when our products are being used. So that's why electrification and those other measures are so important. Approximately 4% of the emission comes from the components and the materials that goes into the vehicle. So the batteries, steel, electronics, aluminium, etc. And then it's less than 1%, which is our own operation and the electricity and energy that we purchase. But those 4%, they will grow as we get more electrified vehicles on the road. So we have, of course, started to work also on that. And also here we start with the components that have the biggest emission footprint. And then steel comes very high up on the list. Approximately 70% of the weight of a truck comes from steel. So the decarbonized steel has been very important for us. And we had some ideas and we were looking really for a partner to decarbonize. And then we found the Swedish steel manufacturers SSAB. So we had this need and they had an idea, and we joined forces in a partnership. And in the same way as I've talked about some of the other partnerships, one of the really important parts here were that we were willing to share risk on this partnership. So we were not really sure how this would work out. But in the end, we were actually able to make quite a lot of progress. So only in a very short time period, we were able to come up with a prototype for a machine made in fossil-free steel. It was actually the world's first. And in 2022, we were able to start adding fossil-free components or components made of fossil-free steel into the vehicle. And today, when we sell an electric truck, for example, the frame rails are made in fossil-free steel. And we also have produced a articulated hauler, which is a huge machine delivered to a customer, and that's a world's first. So I think that shows both the importance of actually working together with our partners, but also being willing to share some risks. Also on the battery side, we have different works, and on aluminium and some other materials.
Well, sticking with the SSAB partnership for a moment, who was involved in negotiating that, and how is it managed? Like who on the teams keep in touch? Because that seems like a thing that has to be almost like a regular part of business. It has to be embedded.
Absolutely. So this is something that we very much are handling from a purchasing perspective, where we have these partnerships. Then, of course, we have had people from a sustainability perspective, people from a technology perspective, because you need to make sure that it actually works in the vehicles, and it's from an operational perspective. And not the least, we have had our top management being involved in the whole partnership. So it's many parts, but right now I would say that it's a lot in the purchasing department that handles this relationship.
You alluded to some other areas of partnership. What other partnerships have been important for your progress? Like, so can you mention other specific? You mentioned other types, but any specific ones that you can mention?
Yeah. I think another type of partnership that we have been involved in is partnership to create some of the enablers for this transition. So a very interesting partnership is one that we have with our two main competitors. It's Daimler Truck and Traton Group, where we are having a joint venture called Milence, where we are to build charging infrastructure. we have said that we will build 1,700 charging points in Europe. And we also have corporations in US to build charging infrastructure. And that is really, really important with these kind of partnerships to be able to do that. We also have a partnership with Daimler Truck to develop fuel cells. It's called Cellcentric, where we do early technology development together. And we have a partnership on aluminium also.
Your team is helping a great deal. Thank you very much for that.
Actually have one person standing in front of the sun right now.
Thank you.
Talking about collaboration.
Thank you for quickly. Yes, exactly. So I'm curious about those relationships with competitors. How did you get that past the board? Like, how does that work? Right. So that's a pretty, and how do you have to how do you make sure that where you're collaborating and where you could continue to compete?
Yeah, and that is of course super crucial for us, not only from our perspective, but also from an authority perspective. So I should be very clear on the fact that this is something that we need EU approval of. But EU has given approval to some of these types of relationships and collaborations where it's for the greater good. And there are many areas where we can collaborate without jeopardizing in any way that we are tough competitors out on the market, but where it's just so complex, it's so costly, and it's not really that we would gain something from developing our own charging infrastructure. And the charging infrastructure that we are to develop together with Daimler and Traton is, of course, open for any truck brand. So, but it's, I think, tough challenges require new ways of working, really.
So speaking of working with other entities, customer relationships, one of the things I found most fascinating about your most recent transition report is you look at the transition off of fossil fuels as a way to create longer term customer relationships, ones that increase revenue potential by 50% compared with conventional vehicles. So how do these, like, what do you mean by getting closer with customers? How is that relationship changing? Let's just start there.
Yeah, and I think, as I talked about a little bit in the beginning of the conversation, that we actually need to work much closer to the customer, that we need to be much more involved in their operations. That is, of course, one way for us to have a closer collaboration with our customers, and that our customers in many cases do have the same types of targets as we do, and sharing sort of the same ambition also gives a very good benefit to the relationship.
I know Scope 4 isn't really a real thing, but part of what fascinated me about what you're doing is that your net zero strategies really depend on what your customers do, right? So I'm curious how you count avoided transportation emissions, the customers avoided transportation emissions towards your net zero strategy. Is that count? Like, does that count towards what you're doing? How do you look at that?
So if you mean that if our customers would drive less, for example, that's not something that we could.
Meaning that they're driving electric. Yeah. I mean, or another, not a fossil fuels free, if you will.
Yeah. If they're driving electric, that is definitely something that we are calculating and measuring on a quarterly basis, and we are reporting on it on a yearly basis. And as I said, that's 95% of our total emission footprint. So that's what really counts if we are going to make a decrease. And of course, we are in that way having an ambition which we need to work together with the customers to achieve. Really in that sense, and that's why it's so important to get all the prerequisites in place so that we actually can support the customers, because today we have the solutions for the customers, and then we may need to make sure that they are actually able to transition into these new types of vehicles by making sure that we have charging infrastructure and all those things in place.
How does the transition create business value for Volvo? How is that being looked at as a growth strategy?
Yeah, I think you need to have the basic shouldn't call it idea, but the basic vision or ambition in mind that we have to move into more sustainable transportation. We know that the business that we're in, transportation and logistics, is absolutely crucial to the way we know society today. We also know that the need for transportation of people, of goods, is actually increasing. And that's, of course, great for business. But unless we do it in a much more sustainable way, it will be very, very difficult. So we are sort of both committed, but also we really feel that this is the right way to move. Then what we cannot 100% steer is sort of the pace of this. And of course, we need to move with our customers on this to make it viable for them. Otherwise, it won't be viable for us either. But we're sure that in the long run, this is the only business option that we do have to move. And then it can take 10 years or 15 years, but that this is the right direction. We are pretty convinced about that fact.
And are your internal stakeholders fully convinced of that? I mean, like, beyond your team, is this just a way of culturally thinking now at Volvo Group? I'm just curious how that's sort of
I would say that we have a very good top management commitment on our sustainability targets, then including our net zero, our ambition to be net zero by 2040. Is that easy? No. Do we have to discuss that quite a lot on how to time phase different things and investments? Yes. But our ambition to 2040 stands firm.
What are some of your most successful arguments? By the way, I've been weaving audience questions in here, and this is kind of one of the ones that's good. So
yeah.
How do you, what are the arguments that you use that are successful, that keep people on track, on your side, essentially?
To continue on this journey?
Yes.
I think we have so many evidence in the world around us today that actually climate change is happening. It's impacting each and every one of us. So I don't think I need to argue too much on that side that this is the right way to move. But I think that it's really what is the big discussion right now is how we can make sure that we get this ecosystem in sync, that we make sure that we get everyone in the different markets to work towards the same goal. And that's not always the case as it looks right now.
What are your most successful strategies for doing that? When you talk about the ecosystem, policy, these partnerships, like what are drivers that are really helping there and that maybe other companies should think about?
I think that it's important to be quite open and transparent. I think that's something that I feel is a big difference from some years back, that we as a company, we have to be much more open about our plans. We must be willing to share what we're thinking and how we would like, or how we think that we'll have to do things. Because otherwise, if we're not open saying, we think we can have an electric truck later this decade, we think we can have a fuel cell electric truck. If we don't tell those things, then we can't have someone building charging infrastructure or providing other things that will be needed. So sharing of plans, I think, is quite important, and to have that dialogue between different stakeholders. So we meet a lot of policymakers, we meet with lots of customers, suppliers, etc., to really get the dialogue going so that we can overcome some of these hurdles together.
And just one other last question on this sort of idea of communicating these goals. How are you communicating with shareholders? What are some of your really effective strategies there?
We are communicating every year, of course, through our annual report in sharing how we are progressing. And I think to showcase some of the proof points that this actually do work, I think is important when it comes to shareholders, but also to talk about how it can create value for us, but also for society in different ways.
Okay. I have another audience question I want to give you. So have you issued green bonds for battery electric trucks, and could this be a way to raise capital to scale production toward the EV targets for 2030 and beyond?
We have not done that.
You have not. How have you been financing this from an R&D perspective?
We have had a very good financial situation in the company, which I think is important to have the freedom to be able actually to have a forward-looking, to do the things that we need to be future-proofing our company.
I have a couple more questions for you before we wrap up. What has been your biggest mistake so far, and what did you learn from it?
I think, I'm not sure it's a mistake, but I think I don't have too much patience as a person, and underestimating how long time things take to change, both internally and externally. I said in the beginning that if I would interview a candidate for a position, I think patience and persistence is two very important things that you need to have with you. And that's maybe something where I need to work a little bit more on that myself.
And reflecting on the next generation a little bit here, or maybe someone just interested in changing jobs, what advice would you give to someone considering a career in either climate tech or corporate sustainability, someone who aspires to be you in 28 years?
I think that this is a super interesting topic. I think what is really, I think combining something that feels good in your heart with being able to work in a very, to work in a business, I think that's very satisfying. I think having even though you might be specialized in a specific topic of sustainability, like climate or environment or human rights or whatever field, I think to have a quite broad outlook, because sustainability needs to be seen in the view of the whole business and the whole society. So to broaden your horizons a little bit, I think is important, to be both an expert, but also to have a bit more of general knowledge.
Well, Karin, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for also being a good sport about your sunlight. I hope it is a beautiful evening there for you.
It is. It is.
You get to enjoy it. Thank you so much for spending time with us. And thank you also to the audience for your questions. I appreciate it. This is Heather Clancy signing off of the latest episode of Climate Pioneers.